In a 1 hour heated class, once you rehydrate, one of the magical things, because it isn't that stressful, is you feel reinvigorated. Like somebody who comes in the first time is going to go, oh, this is just going to beat the shit out of me. I'm going to be dead the whole day. It's anything but. You feel reinvigorated for the entire, the moment you get out and you cool down and you get a little bit of, if you sweat a lot, getting some hydration in you. It's not like, oh, I need a nap. I just took a yoga class. It's just like you feel totally invigorated.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Tom Schey, and we're going to be talking about hot yoga and his path to opening the Sweat Yoga Studios in Los Angeles, California. But first, I'd like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests. There's also a little bio on myself. There's also a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. As I said, my guest today is Tom Schey. Tom is going to explain what hot yoga is, the benefits of it, how he discovered hot yoga through his practice of Ashtanga yoga, and the connection to his studios in California with his hometown of Detroit. Although Tom has recently sold the studios, his knowledge of how they work and how hot yoga works and the history of yoga, particularly in the Los Angeles area, was of great interest to me because I didn't know much about it. So I'm going to let him tell the story. This is Tom Schey. Thank you for doing the show, Tom. I'm so glad you're here, and we're going to get to talk about sweat yoga, hot yoga in particular, or sweat in particular, but hot yoga. Well, I'm assuming you started with yoga at some point in your life. When was that?
Well, I grew up in Detroit and wasn't a professional athlete, but was athletic. And so I became a pretty dedicated runner right coming out of high school. I played high school football, got recruited by a couple of small colleges, went to University of Michigan, and running became an obsession with me, almost like a drug addict, to the extent that I never missed a day. It didn't matter if it was snowing or raining. If I was traveling to Europe and I had a 7 a.m. flight, I was out running at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was just something I did every day. I knew my personality was somewhat addictive, but I thought, if running is the worst way that is going to come to the surface, I can live with that. And so I was running marathons, et cetera. And I moved out, started commuting to LA right around 2000 from Detroit. I was at a point in my life where I wanted to come out to the West Coast. I had some work out here. I kind of fell in love with a lot of what Southern California had to offer versus, what Detroit was at the time, which was a very different community back in 2000. And started going to a gym in West Hollywood because that was close to a hotel that I was commuting back and forth to Detroit. And just walked into my first yoga class, really pretty woman teaching it. I'm like, okay, let's see what that's all about. And from there, became a fairly regular practitioner, both in California and then when I would return back to Michigan.
Oh, okay. I assumed you'd started much younger than, or earlier than 2000. So that's really interesting. So 24 years. That's a long time to do anything. But I remember taking my first class back in 1985. Did it for about 2-3 years, and I just stopped. I don't know why I stopped. I don't remember. And now I'm starting again because of sweat yoga. My daughter found the studio and she said, you got to do it. And so my wife and I both tried it and we loved it. So how did you transition to or find out about hot yoga
And then and how did you start doing that? And then how did you think about doing that as a full-time business?
Well, first of all, I'm a lawyer and I have a little niche career that I probably work 10 or 15 days a year on, and basically from 1990 all the way through current. And so, but it's not a full-time gig. And so there's always a piece of me that's an entrepreneur. And, I was fairly addicted to kind of a healthy lifestyle. And there's a story behind how Sweat came to LA. There's a story behind what motivated me to bring that type of yoga out here. And it's probably the furthest thing that one might imagine if they were writing my story without knowing what the actual story is.
Okay. I
fell in love with yoga to such an extent that when I rented my first kind of condo here, and I was commuting back and forth for almost a year, but I was staying in a hotel in West Hollywood. And that got to be expensive and weird, and living in and out of a hotel, because I had shared custody with my daughter. And so I would be in Detroit for a week with my daughter. And it wasn't like pure calendar, like week in, week out, but it was pretty close. Then I would come out to California for a week because my work followed me wherever I went. Pretty much like post-pandemic work styles, that style was already in my life back in like 1995, 2000. That being said, I started really falling in love with kind of an athletic, vinyasa-based, Ashtanga-based yoga in California. And at all places, it started with me going to the Crunch Gym on Sunset Boulevard.
Okay. I remember that. I know that place.
Yeah, that place, the Den of Inequity. And I had a friend who was working for Reebok that I knew from New York, who had moved out to California. And she was out in California, and we connected, and she said, "Why don't you come with me to this yoga class in Santa Monica?" So I went to Maha Yoga at 26th and San Vicente, and that alone changed my life for the next 10 years. I didn't really know a lot of people in LA. The yoga was very much kind of an LA scene at the time, celebrity-driven, really pretty people. The teacher was a really well-known yogi. Now, for different reasons, he's well-known, but his name was Steve Ross. And I kind of fell in love with the yoga. It was crowded. It was hot. It wasn't heated. It just, the room wasn't well ventilated. It was always full of people. Oh. And to the extent that I needed to open up an office in Los Angeles, and I actually took an office across the street from the studio, because being self-employed, I could walk over at any point and take class. And I was a fairly regular. Also, it contributed to my social life. I didn't really know people out here. And one of the aspects of Sweat, one of the aspects of most yoga studios, particularly more in the old days, was community. Like, you met people, they became your friends. They were like-minded. They were living a healthy lifestyle. It wasn't like, this guy's a crazy druggie and I'm going to a yoga studio and we connected. There are people with similar interests, focuses in their life on a healthy lifestyle. And it became kind of a little bit the center of my life to some degree. So I still was going back and forth to Detroit, even when I took a condominium in Santa Monica. And there's a very famous yoga family. You probably know them, the Kest, K-E-S-T, Brian Kest.
Yeah, I've heard the name.
Johnny Kest. So Brian started Power Yoga up on Santa Monica, the contribution-based yoga. He's still a pretty well-known, famous guy around the world. He's headquartered here in California, but he travels nonstop. I was kind of getting fed up with the behavior that was taking place at Maha Yoga. It was just getting out of control. People were bringing their phones in the room and in the middle of class sitting and talking with friends and just all this crazy stuff that was very disconnected from what I think is appropriate in a yoga room. And so I switched over to YogaWorks. Again, one of the pillars of the yoga community in the United States, certainly in California, but really in the United States. I go back to Detroit, and while Brian Kest was out here in California, his brother was teaching in Detroit. The family grew up in Hawaii, really close roots to Ashtanga yoga. I mean, Ashtanga yoga is only 100 years old. And the couple of big practitioners taught the Kest's father. And so the lineage of what we're doing at Sweat and what modern yoga is really was very connected to the Kest's. And then, like everybody else, you put your own spin on it. So I go back to Detroit. Johnny's studio in Birmingham, Michigan was heated. Studio I was coming from in LA was playing music, not great music, but fun music, repetitive music. And I'd go back and I'd say, Johnny, you got to start playing music in your class. He goes, no, I'm not playing music in my class. His brother to this day doesn't play music in his class. So finally, Johnny came around and started playing music in his classes when I would visit in Detroit, and the studio was heated and the studio was kind of dark, and it just clicked. It just clicked. It's just like, this is a perfect environment. Most yoga studios, particularly hot studios, are well lit. They have mirrors around the rooms, and I find it really distracting, and I find it to be kind of the antithesis of looking in and being connected to yourself that occurs when you're in a darker room without mirrors, when there's music that kind of is meditative, whether it be hip hop or some great world music or something that just takes your mind to a different place.
The level of heat that was happening in Detroit, was it as hot as what you're doing now? Because it seems like it's, when I know people go to other studios around the country and they say nothing is as hot like Sweat Yoga has been hot, which is what I love about it.
I'd love it to be a little more scientific than it actually is. I made a decision when I opened up the first studio 10 years ago, doing as much research. Well, it was interesting. Back in 2012, maybe 2011, starting to do research on how to heat up a yoga room. There were 5,000 different avenues. There wasn't like a science to it. One guy was an expert. He was selling $100,000 furnace systems. Another one was doing radiant heat. Another one was doing whatever. And there was a big movement towards infrared heat, both in saunas and in a couple of cutting edge yoga studios. After making plenty of mistakes, because the first thing we did when we opened up the Santa Monica studio was to have enormous blown air, hot burner furnace kind of things. They're called air pumps. It was terrible heat. And I knew I'd made a mistake within a week of opening it up, because the one thing you don't want is you don't want hot air blowing on you. It's distracting. It's really dry. It's just very uncomfortable. And that's what we had designed to go in there. And so in the ceiling that is dormant and hasn't been turned on for almost 4 years or 5 years is this insanely powerful furnace system.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I immediately started seeking out an infrared heating system. Infrared is dormant. It's got a lot of health benefits. Most of the newer sauna systems, the higher end sauna systems around the world, are not heated with rocks on a heater, but they're infrared heating systems. And I'll explain that in a moment. So we have the hot air furnace system. We then installed a series of infrared heaters. They look like big black speakers, but they're actually infrared heaters. They don't light up like red, like a glow, like a stove or something. That's not the way they actually function. But they're operating. They don't actually heat up the air. They heat up things. Infrared sends an infrared ray out that bounces off the floor and heats up the floor, or bounces off the cement pillars, or bounces off the bricks, or if there's a human being in there, bounces off your body. So you can walk in the room and it doesn't feel that hot, but it's 30 minutes later, it's different because the infrared is actually hitting your skin and your body and heating it up that way. So initially we put in infrared heaters, and we were using both blown air and infrared heaters. And the long and the short of it is, by the time we got done with the whole thing, we upped the amperage of the infrared heaters, shut down the blown air system 100%, except for ventilation when it gets too hot, to pull the air out of the room.
Well, I'll just speak from my own experience. And this is what I love, is the thing that you just talked about. I love that it's dark. I love that. And I love that there's no mirrors. I've done yoga with mirrors. It's okay, but it's a little bit too bright for me. And you don't, like you were saying, you don't really get this personal experience. And not only is it dark in there, that helps me to do something which I have, I'm doing more of, is closing my eyes when I'm doing my practice. Probably at least half of my practice, my eyes are closed, because I can do that. And I don't feel like anybody's looking at me. I don't feel at all intimidated by other people and what they can do and what I can't do. I mean, most of the people in there are half my age. I'm 69. So, a lot of the people are in their 20s and 30s, and they can do stuff I can't do, but I don't care, because, my practice is mine. And to your credit and the studio's credit, the teachers always talk about that. This is your practice. You don't need to even, if you want to look and see what people are doing to get an idea of maybe a pose you don't quite understand, great. But don't compare yourself to other people. Don't worry about that. This is for you. And the other piece of it that I also love is when you guys talk about doing the 3 flows during a class. So the teacher runs you through, just for the people listening, the teacher will run you through a series of poses a couple of times. Then you're on your own for a little while with the music, and you can add or subtract or hold poses longer if you feel like it. It's guided, and yet it is very personal. And it took me a while to understand like how important that is for when I go in there, that I'm able to modify my practice to fit me, because there's things I can't do. There's issues with everyone's bodies. Maybe you got a screwed up knee and you can't do certain things, and it's not like everyone's got to do the same exact thing all the time, because it isn't one size fits all, but it's guided in such a way that you feel very taken care of.
So historic yoga teaching is very alignment based. When a yoga teacher comes up to the front of the class and demands that bodies be in a certain alignment, all bodies be in the same alignment, one that fails to recognize the fact that your body, regardless of your age, even if you were 30 and there was 5 other 30-year-olds next to you, is going to be different than it's like anything else in the world. It's like a husband and wife getting married. They're 2 different experiences coming into this, into this marriage. There's, different bodies coming into the room with different experience. Somebody who's been a runner their whole life, somebody who doesn't work out, somebody who's just trying to get into yoga, somebody who has got natural flexibility, somebody that eats differently. There's all these different body types. So the strict alignment focus was something that I always found to be, I think, more of a detriment than a positive thing. It's elevating the teacher to a position of they know more than you do. They know more about your body. And if you don't adhere to what they're saying, something bad is going to happen. We don't believe in that. But I will tell you that we give alignment suggestions. Almost all the teachers do, to different varying degrees. I taught there over 1,000 classes. We also recognize that people's bodies, ages, and you know what? Tuesday may very well be different than Thursday for you. We have seen from time to time, people doing things that could injure themselves, and we will get involved. It's really, really rare. I would say the 1,000 classes I have taught, I've interfered in that context maybe 5 or 6 times. So I'm not a firm believer that EMS is going to come into the room if you don't nail Warrior 2 and pull you out because you have injured yourself. And I think most of our teachers today also believe in that. It's also kind of runs parallel to kind of the dogma that we don't want to have our teachers bring into the yoga room, which is I'm smarter, I'm more spiritual, I can talk the yoga talk bullshit. It may not mean anything, but, connect your heart to your thigh and breathe out of your left hip. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't have a place for air to come in and out of my left hip. And so this type of conversation that is a killer, I don't own the studios anymore, but when I set this up, if a teacher came and was auditioning with us and working with us, because we had a pretty extensive training program, and they couldn't get rid of the yoga schmoga talk, rather than connect as a human being, they weren't teaching it sweat. And that's, I think, very connective in today's day and age. Not so much the dogma of saying this kind of just repetitive yoga teacher stuff that just people want to turn off. If they're in the room and they're fit and they're emotionally working to block out the teacher because they can't hear the same repetitive stuff day in and day out, it's not the experience that we're trying to create there.
Well, that's another reason I love taking classes, that the teachers are all incredibly competent. I haven't had a bad class yet. It just doesn't happen. And they're all different. They're all who they are. And the ones that are more like themselves, some are newer and some people, some of it's a function of youth, or this idea of thinking I'm a yoga teacher, so I've got to do yoga talk like you were talking about. The people that do that, I'm less attracted to than the people that are really authentic and just talking like a regular voice, and are enthusiastic and passionate. And I found that to be the case there, and which is why I keep coming back. I just love the experience of the different people. It's been really helpful to know that when I go in there, I'm going to get a great experience, and it might be different. And you do have different style classes, which I really like. There's what I would call more of a workout aerobic style class that's called Sweat Chisel, and you use weights, which I've never seen in a yoga studio. Not that I've been to.
That's fairly common in today, most of the modern yoga studios. What we've tried to do differently with our weights classes, the focus on the way that we set this up, and this is really Lena Dakin and myself. Lena, was my first yoga director when I opened up the company, was with the company until I sold the company earlier this year, is we wanted to bring in chisel sculpt, whatever it's called at each studio. We call it chisel. We wanted to bring that in a way that mimicked a yoga class, and so that the portion of the class that has weights, that where you're holding weights in your arms, are yoga poses. They're yoga poses with weights in your hand versus a cross-training, crazy, movement-based kind of thing. So we wanted to keep it grounded. We still do a couple of versions of sun salutations before the class picks up weights in their hand.
Yes.
So the warm-up and the class is typically very much like a typical sweat class, except for the 15 or 20 minutes portions that are, for the most part, upper arm strength. There's a lot of lower body strength in that too. One of the things that you just raised was kind of one of the founding DNA pieces of when I set up the studio. We were not release a teacher to teach in our studios. Basically, the threshold question was, do we want to take their class? If we didn't want to take their class, we didn't want them teaching at the studio. Mm. I think that was a fairly fair barometer of who was going to teach and who wasn't. And of course, once a newer teacher gets past that and starts teaching, they evolve, they get more confident, they grow. But just the initial entry to teach at Sweat was that. And the reason was, I wanted the experience to be, you came in for teacher A, you didn't know teacher A was out today, and you ended up staying for teacher B, and you had a different experience, but it was a good experience. That was as important to me as almost any other of the other founding principles that we put together at that studio.
I think that's one of the big reasons that your studio was successful and still is. Is that aspect. You feel like you're in good hands no matter who's there. I have preferences, but so what? I mean, who doesn't? I have musical preferences, and I like certain people's voices more than other things, but every class is has been very worthwhile and different. I love the different styles within the style of that. There are variances that are really nice. They're very personal.
I will tell you that the teachers that you like, that you go to, the work that they put in prior to you walking into that room, the selection of music, the order of music, searching it out, it's a science. And Spotify's great because it's got so much AI that once it finds your tendencies, it helps in the search. You also would know, I promise you, you would notice if you were listening to the same music day in and day out. You'd notice it in a minute. The teachers know how important that music element of it is, and some of them choreograph it better. I was just, from the time I was a kid, I was putting playlists together for restaurants and retail stores, and I played the guitar and going to concerts my whole life. So I've always been searching for new music. For me to find a Nigerian hip hop artist, that would make my day. Like, some obscure thing that was just mind-blowingly great and would catch your attention in the middle of a class.
Yeah, there's some amazing stuff throughout the world. If you have a global interest in music, there's just so many great people. Let's talk about the benefits of one, infrared heat, and two, sweating to the degree that you sweat in there. I mean, I come out of there, I'm soaked. I'm absolutely pouring sweat. I know there's some yoga, what would you call them, traditionalists that say the body needs to heat up itself, and that this artificial thing is not correct, and it's not, this purist nonsense. Maybe it isn't nonsense. I don't know. But what are the advantages to sweating to that degree and the infrared heat?
In a 1 hour heated class, once you rehydrate, one of the magical things, because it isn't that stressful, is you feel reinvigorated. Like somebody who comes in the first time is going to go, oh, this is just going to beat the shit out of me. I'm going to be dead the whole day. It's anything but. You feel reinvigorated for the entire, the moment you get out and you cool down and you get a little bit of, if you sweat a lot, getting some hydration in you. It's not like, oh, I need a nap. I just took a yoga class. It's just like you feel totally invigorated. That's one of the connections that I have with all the years of running I did and this heated yoga. Clearly, what does it do? And there's different schools of this. And that school's about whether it's good to, heat naturally. Well, if that was the case, we'd never have a sauna anywhere. The infrared heaters, number one, are healthier because they don't spread. They're not pushing air around. So that dry air and other people's potentially bacteria that might be in the air isn't there. I mean, during the COVID period, infrared heaters, and I don't want to get sued for this, I don't own the studios anymore, but infrared heaters burn and kill all bacteria in the air. So the best of our knowledge, during that whole course of COVID reopening, all the restrictions, we never had a student-to-student transmission in any of our yoga classes because the infrared heaters are known to kill bacteria. And so there's a health element to that. That's kind of ancillary as to what it does to your body. What it does to your body is it is a slow, gradual heating process. You don't walk in there like it's 110 degrees on a humid day on a Mexico beach. You feel the heat, but it's a gradual buildup because it is heating your body up versus heating the air up. It's one of the reasons that it is difficult to control with exact temperature. Blown air furnaces, you have a thermostat. It tells you what the air is, right? Guess what? The infrared heaters heat things up. They don't heat the air up. So it may heat the floor up and the ambient air in the room starts getting heated up, but it's really hard when somebody says exactly what is your temperature, the ultimate temperature in that room. It's a range. I never have thought that our thermostats are accurate because we're not heating air up. A thermostat in a room to turn on an air conditioning unit or a heating unit is taking a measurement of the ambient air. And if you're above it, it's going to turn on the air conditioning. If you're below it, it's going to turn on the heat. That doesn't work with infrared heaters. So the process is more gentle, even though some days it may feel like an oven in there because of what's going on outside and the room's full, et cetera. So it's cleaner in that it's not pushing bacteria around from student to student. And in fact, it's killing much of the bacteria in the room. The heating process, whether I don't firmly believe that it changes your internal organs in any way, but I think that the heating process on the body, this gradual buildup because of what the infrared rays do to your body, being absorbed in there over the hour period of time, is just a healthier way of heating your body up. And you cool down in 5 minutes the minute you walk out of there. You could probably wash out most of the toxins in your body if you hydrated with a ton of water every day. This speeds up the process. Does this pull the toxins out of your system? Again, go to different experts, they'll say different things. Is sweating good for your skin? There's no question it gets some of the surface toxins out and oils and things like that, causes your body to replenish and replace that. So for the most part, I mean, if you look at your skin and you look at most people coming out of there 5 minutes after they're out of class, they've got a really healthy glow.
Now, here's an interesting thing I want to talk about, what I like about it, because there's part of it I don't like when it's happening. The fact that, you're guided through a flow, and then there's some music is usually turned up, and then you're doing the same flow based on the postures that you've been shown. My memory for that flow sometimes, especially if it's a little complicated, will be tough for me, and I'll get frustrated with myself. Or I won't be able to, my difficulty in remembering the order. And did I leave anything out? So I get to watch myself get annoyed and upset with myself. But it also helps my concentration and my memory for that. So I think there's a lot to learn from doing that and not being guided every step of the way the entire class. Do you find that to be the case?
Well, there's two things with that. The fact that you are being tested a little bit and your mind has to work and connect and try and remember really has a couple of benefits. One of the benefits is it gets you out of your shit. It puts you in the moment. And that's really what yoga is about. It gets you in that room on the mat, thinking about what you're doing, where your body's going. You're probably not thinking about somebody who didn't return your call last night when you're in the middle of one of the longer sun salutations that we teach, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It keeps you present, period. This style of yoga really was created not by us. I mean, I think we perfected it in many ways, but Johnny Kest in Detroit was doing this. And it was so weird because when we first opened up the studio, I flew 6 teachers in from LA to Detroit. So if you think you get confused on 7 postures that are linked, sun salutation B, because that is a more parochial community, it was a wealthy community outside of Detroit, the same people were going to the same classes over and over, those flows would be 30 to 40 postures linked. Wow. So I'm bringing all these amazing, gorgeous, strong, young yoga teachers with me to get trained on really what's going on in Detroit and what we're going to try to bring to LA. And they're looking at me like I am nuts, and they're confused, 10 postures into it. So what we're doing in LA is a simpler version of it. But I defer to Johnny, who used to say these linked postures in the dark room and causing you to put your body in these postures in a way that made sense, following kind of the lead of the teacher, and then giving yourself a couple of minutes. It's not 30 minutes of being on your own, but it's 2 or 3 minutes after a teacher is done teaching the flow. And they teach it, right side, left side, right side before they let you go. Test your neuroreceptors in your brain. So it's actually doing some of the things that the apps are saying that they're testing to, they say, doing crossword puzzles is a great mental exercise to fend off Alzheimer's and other, mind weakening things that happen with age. And so we firmly believe that it's got a lot of benefits. That's one of the benefits that's actually testing you. The other benefit is it's keeping you present. And if you can be in that room for 1 hour, all of your shit in your life is going to be the good and bad and indifferent. It's going to be there at the end of that hour. And so if the testing you mentally and physically, not testing you physically so you get hurt, but testing you mentally and physically to the point of where you take your body as far as you're comfortable taking it, put you in that mind frame of you're in that room, you're present for that 1 hour. All the other stuff will be there. It'll all be there waiting for you the moment class is over. So give yourself the respite, the welcome vacation emotionally for that 1 hour to be in that room. Feel uncomfortable sometimes when it's too hot, when they play a shitty song that for some reason rubs you the wrong way and you're aggravated. That's all okay. Just be in that room for that 1 hour.
Once I started to not beat myself up a little bit for like, I'm not remembering, I'm smarter than this, or I can't do what those people are doing, or if this is too hard, this is too, and I watch my mind, when I can step out of watching my mind do its number on me. It's kind of funny.
One of the 8 limbs of yoga is dharma, which is basically concentration. We want you to have to think a little bit at that point, on those suns. They're just sun salutations. They're not like this completely innovative, crazy thing. I mean, there was historical sun A and sun B sun salutations going all the way back to Patabi Joyce in like the 1930s, 1940s when Ashtanga yoga was kind of invented, right? So we tricked them up a little bit. And I don't mean that for the sake of we tricked them up, because that's our trick. We trick them up. That's our style of yoga. We firmly believe that it gets you connected to yourself. It's meditative. It requires a little brain power. It requires a little restraint, how far you can take it, what you're comfortable with. Look, if you want to modify your practice, more power to you. We totally support that. Almost every teacher says it at some point in class, to make people comfortable, but also because we firmly believe in it. It's a community, and the community is forgiving, and the community thinks you don't have to do what the person next to you does. And you and I are of a different age group than the majority of people that in that studio. Your Warrior 2 isn't going to look like somebody who's 26 and uber flexible, and that's perfect. That's just exactly the way it should be.
Well, I always think about that quote from Laird Hamilton about surfing. He goes, "You know who the best surfer is? The one who's having the most fun." And I kind of look at anything like that. If I'm doing this thing and I'm loving it and I'm feeling good, who cares about anything?
That's mission accomplished.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me today. Any what's next for Tom Schey, if you want to talk about that, or you don't have to?
I've kind of fallen in love with this concept of a big parcel of land, a farm on it, a farm-to-table restaurant, a health and wellness hospitality end of it. There's a lot of people that want to take vacations that are more experiential. What if could be, you're going to a place where there's great hiking, there may be great classes, you may go to the farm and help pick the meal that the chef is going to cook at this great farm-to-table restaurant. There may more than likely will be some type of animal rescue on there that you can go work at an hour, spend 2 hours, if you want to, at that piece of the property. Well, I found one of them, and the next thing I know, there's one in Portugal that's approached me. Do I want to invest there? And one in Texas, and I actually just did invest in one, and I'm going to be putting the health and wellness piece of it together outside of Santa Barbara, closer to San Ynez. That will be all of those things. It's a 120-acre winery. We're converting it into farm-to-table restaurant, an experiential hospitality place, health and wellness. It's with a really good group of collaborators, very professional people. And I'm hoping to do and complete the same type of thing, maybe with the same group, maybe under the same umbrella in Mexico.
I love it. What a great idea.
I just think the world's ready to get a more creative kind of schedule and choices than what's out there. And we've got a really good group of people putting this together. So I'm excited about it.
The best of luck on that. I'm sure it'll do really well. It's fantastic. Thanks for your time, Tom. I know you're a busy guy, and you were very generous with your time. And certainly thank you for creating Sweat Yoga, where I still go. Even though you don't own it, I still attend because it makes me happier.
That's called mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. Tom Schey.
Hey, I don't own it, and I still go. So what the hell?
I know. I saw you this morning. It was great.
I actually have more time to go since I don't own it.
Yeah, I know. I think I've seen you there more since you sold it. Yeah.
All right. Take it easy, Bob.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tom. Have a great day.
Bye. Right.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. Check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com, the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, big thanks to Tom Schey, and you folks have a fabulous day. Thank you.